Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, relatives of murdered Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba attended a sombre ceremony in Brussels as Belgium returned his tooth. It's all that remains of him after his assassination in 1961. The former colonial power was found to be morally responsible for his death. Also, Kenya said that bringing down rocketing teen pregnancy figures is a priority. The country has no reproductive health legislation, but the public is going to give its input on a regional bill that could make a big difference to sexual health services. And the refugee status of hundreds of thousands of Ivorians who fled post-electoral violence in the country in 2011 comes to an end later this month. While some are keen to go back, others say that they're still uncertain. But first, Belgium is hoping to turn the page on its bloody colonial past and move towards reconciliation with DR Congo. This week, it returned the tooth of murdered DR Congolese icon Patrice Lumumba to his family after it was taken as a macabre trophy by a Belgian police commissioner. The murkiness surrounding Lumumba's death still weighs heavily on DRC. Belgium has admitted moral responsibility for the assassination, but stopped short of naming those responsible. No one's ever been convicted. Our correspondents tell us more.
This historian spent years collecting archives and eyewitness accounts to identify the exact location of Patrice Lumumba's killing.
Voilà.
That night, some 20 people gathered here deep in the Congolese savannah in the southern Katanga province. The mineral-rich region had seceded a few months earlier, with the support of Western nations keen to retain control of Congo's resources and suspecting Lumumba of ties to the Soviet Union. Katanga President Moise Tshombe was present, as were 4 Belgian officers and a firing squad. Standing opposite them, 3 prisoners, including Patrice Lumumba. He'd been deposed and arrested a few weeks earlier. All 3 were shot dead and hastily buried.
They left without realizing that a part of Lumumba's foot was still sticking out. His corpse was the last to be thrown into the pit, and his toe remained outside.
The next day, Belgian officers returned to the scene and dug up the bodies to move them. 3 days later, they dismembered the corpses and dissolved them in sulfuric acid, secretly saving 2 teeth from Lumumba's body as a trophy.
There was a deliberate attempt to falsify history. They agreed to a pact of silence, whereby no one would ever tell the truth.
The mystery surrounding Lumumba's assassination hasn't stopped his children from seeking the truth. More than 60 years on, Juliana still wants answers.
There was a murder, but somehow there is no culprit. Not a single one. There was a murder, but there is no body. These are, amongst other things, and areas that deserve further clarification.
All eyes are now set on Brussels. 20 years ago, a parliamentary inquiry concluded that Belgium only had a moral responsibility in the killing of the Congolese Prime Minister. This sociologist, however, says that Belgian authorities were directly involved.
Legally speaking, the concept of moral responsibility is nonsense. And that was exactly the aim, so to speak, of the Belgian political class, which is to avoid specifying the role of all the Belgian players involved in Patrice Lumumba's death.
Patrice Lumumba's children filed a complaint in Belgium in 2011, but no trial date has been set so far.
Kenya still has no national reproductive health legislation, a particularly worrying absence in light of skyrocketing teen pregnancy figures. This month, the public will be able to weigh in on an sexual and reproductive health rights bill that could make a big difference to services available to women. But it's been 5 years since it was first introduced and is yet to be passed. Our correspondent Vivian Wandera spoke to one sexual health campaigner who says the country can't afford not to adopt it.
In Kenya, 45,000 teenage pregnancies were reported in a 5-month period. And that's, if we translate this, it's approximately 700 adolescent girls getting pregnant every single day. This bill seeks to push these numbers down because it provides a framework where teenagers and adolescents are able to get correct information so that they're making responsible choices. The bill also talks about ending gender-based violence, and if you look at the figures, there's a report that showed that Eastern and Southern Africa have the highest rates of gender-based violence across the whole continent, and this bill seeks to put down those numbers. It seeks to end FGM, it seeks to end forced marriage, it also provides a framework for men and boys' sexual and reproductive health rights. And it's important in terms of public participation for people to understand exactly what it is and to put in their memoranda to the Legislative Assembly, just so that they can then go to Parliament and make an informed decision because they represent the people.
So 5 years since the first reading of the bill in 2017, it has not yet been passed. What exactly has caused this stalemate to date?
A lot of countries are patriarchal, right? Women are meant to be seen and not heard. And when we talk about issues of sexual and reproductive health, it seems to be a women's and a girl's issue. But there's also the issue of Western funded organizations that are really interfering and pushing the agenda. So we're seeing a lot of opposition that's being funded by, for example, Citizen Go, who have really been front and center in trying to negate the gains that are being made. And so we see them interfering in issues of Africa, yet it's so important for Africa to decide what they want for Africa. So this is a proposed law by Africans for Africans.
So what happens next after the public participation? Are we going to see this bill finally getting the chance it deserves?
This bill provides hope because there is a framework on monitoring and reporting. So every 2 years, each government must provide a status report to the Secretary General of the EAC. And because of how it operates, how things work at the East Africa community, is that one country can actually sue the other for non-compliance. In terms of will it pass, that's why we need people to understand what the bill talks about. Let's not have people just listen to opposition who don't even break down the issues and, term a bill like as an abortion bill or as giving teenagers, access to contraception so that they become promiscuous. No, let's engage with a bill. Let's decide, let's read it and decide what it is that we want.
After a disputed election in Ivory Coast in 2010 broke out into fierce fighting, over 300,000 people fled to neighbouring countries. The return of stability to their homeland means that their refugee status will formally end on June 30th. Although many have already returned home, some are still uncertain of what they'll find if they go back. Samuel Bernard reports.
Reunited after 11 years, it's the second time Raphael is visiting his sister since returning home recently from Togo. For the two siblings, this is an opportunity to make up for lost time.
He came back safe and sound. He was in better shape at the time. But thank God he is alive, and God will look after him.
Raphael had to leave Ivory Coast in 2011 because of his affiliation to former President Laurent Gbagbo. He says that once the political leader was able to come home in June 2021, he too started organizing his own return.
I went to the refugee camp. I gathered them and told them, there is no more reason to be here to suffer.
A former policeman, Raphael is still waiting to regain his civil servant status as promised by the government. Authorities have also announced other measures to encourage refugees to return, cancellation of their unpaid taxes and recovery of all properties that were looted during the war. In total, more than 310,000 refugees have returned to the country since 2011.
As part of the reconciliation process, it was good that everyone returned because they did not want to leave. The reasons that pushed them into exile no longer exist, which is why we invoked the cessation of refugee status clause.
The termination of refugee status for Ivorians, which will be effective at the end of June, has not been well received by all. 13,000 Ivorians have chosen to stay abroad. This political opponent based in Ghana believes the government pledges aren't nearly enough.
I really want to go back to my country, as do many others. But we hope that the security conditions for some of us will be fixed, and the conditions for social reintegration too.
The government claims to have released all political prisoners in Ivory Coast this year. According to the opposition, about 100 are still waiting to be released.
Kenyan Ferdinand Omanyala has been putting his country on the map with his speedy times in the 100 metres. His victory at the African Athletics Championship was the continent's first for the distance. The newcomer is expected to zip past the competition in the World Championships. He's determined to trounce his American rivals on their home turf next month. Shirley Sitburn with more.
Here is the world's fastest man. Ferdinand Omanyala holds this season's record for 100 meters, 9.77 seconds. Now the Kenyan has won his first major title, African champion. Coming up next, the World Athletics Championships in Oregon.
I'm in good shape. I'm in very good shape, and we have a month before we go to the World Championships. And I can tell you that we're going to beat the Americans in their own home.
Omanyala started his sports career in rugby. For 5 years, he muscled up, becoming a successful sprinter. Now aged 26, he believes he will cement a spot among the world's best. He's the 8th fastest runner in history and the first African to make it into the top 10 sprinters group.
Sprints has been dominated so much by Americans and Jamaicans. They should now start forgetting that because now the Africans are coming. Currently, I'm the world leader, so I'm not going anything less than a medal there in Oregon. I'm going to make Kenya proud. I'm going to make Africa proud.
Conditions in Mauritius were far from ideal, yet Omanyala and 2 South African athletes ran under 10 seconds. The head of World Athletics was impressed.
I'm watching world-class times. The men's 100-metre final, 3 athletes under 10 seconds. African sprinting is really coming of age, and those competitors will be very competitive in the World Championships in just a few weeks' time in Oregon.
Ferdinand Omanyala had a 14-month suspension in 2017 for using illegal substances, which he has denied. Now back on track, he wants to clinch a historic victory for the whole continent.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.